This YouTube clip addresses qualified assessors as well as the unqualified assessors who are just contributing to the assessment. So we need to discuss potential barriers to gathering evidence. So as part of the assessment plan, the roles and responsibilities of all of the stakeholders are discussed and agreed upon. And one barrier, though, is when a resource in the workplace isn't available or there isn't access to a workplace. Now, I mean, a workplace is there, an organisation's there to make money, and they might be having some systemic problems at the time. They might be behind in a delivery run and their staff are working overtime, perhaps like in John's case. You know, the people that were supposed to knock off needed to work overtime. We don't have the forklift area available. You know, so there can be some barriers that way, and you know that there really has to be some negotiation between the RTO. That's when you'd actually just ring the registered training organisation, because it's costing the RTO money and paying for your labour. So, you know, that's probably a conversation you don't have to have directly with the organisation, but yes, in that situation you would need to overcome that barrier. Quick call to the RTO, they'd quickly get into touch with the organisation, and you know, possibly if it was a supervising assessor, they might have to be consulted to say, look, we need a simulated environment. Sometimes there can't be a simulated resource. We just have to wait, or you know, perhaps the organisation supervisor there would have to say, look, we just need 5 minutes for an assessment to take place, because you know that's reasonable. You might be able to tick off a lot of your checklist under a time constraint, but you can still actually see them start up the forklift or check for hazards or whatever. So you will need to be a little bit flexible and adaptable, but just be aware of some contingency management plans around there, because there is sometimes barriers to gathering your evidence in a workplace. Not as much control as when it's your own simulated environment that you're responsible for. Attendance of the candidate is another biggie. You've rocked up, workplace is available, resources are available, no candidate. So always ring ahead, especially if you're assessing in the workplace, and make sure that you can confirm the assessment on that particular day before you've invested your time and petrol and travel expenses to get somewhere. Now, the third potential barrier is a very important one, and we're going to expand on this in a moment. So if you are scanning for hazards in the workplace and you're gauging that there's medium, high or extreme risk hazards, that's going to be a barrier, because you can't progress, you can't continue on with that assessment task and risk injury to yourself or to the candidate or to anyone in the vicinity. So you would actually have to cease and control that hazard, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. Now, another barrier is a process. So if the rules of evidence aren't met, then that's going to mean that your evidence is going to be discarded. So a qualified assessor is going to know whether the evidence addresses what it claims to address. So if you were gathering evidence, passing it on to your supervising assessor, they might then discard it and give you feedback and say, look, sorry, you know, what was actually gathered doesn't actually address what it needs to address. So that's a barrier. You would have to go back and negotiate, or actually the assessor, the qualified assessor, would then negotiate with the candidate another means of evidence there. Now, if you're there, you are the one that's determining whether it's authentic under the rules of evidence, whether it's the candidate's own work, or that they can demonstrate a direct relationship to the product that you're there to observe. So if you have seen with your own eyes that they've made the product in front of you or followed the process in front of you, well, it's going to be authentic. But if you're turning up there and they're saying, see, look at this excellent OH&S manual, yeah, I contributed to that, well, then you might ask some questions around that. Just you'll have to probe a little bit deeper. oh, okay, so tell me how the sections are broken down. Tell me what legislation this was based on. Don't forget, when you're the assessor or when you're gathering evidence, you are an expert. You do know what you're looking for here. So that would be quite a realistic expectation. If you can't ask some probing questions, you would have to discard that piece of evidence. Now, the third area is determining whether it's current industry practice. So you've rocked up as an assessor to a workplace and they're using an 8-year ancient computer system, the software's basic, and you know that there's a lot more streamlined, efficient data management systems that are out on the market that don't cost a heck of a lot of money, and you can see that it's slowing their processes down, that it hasn't got the quality control that's the standard anymore, and it's really not meeting current industry benchmarks. So in that case, you'd have to be offering them some feedback around that. Now, current industry practice, that's a conversation that your qualified assessor would be having as feedback. You would just be gathering what you are there to gather, passing it on to the qualified assessor, and they can do the deed.